Excellent. All right, I got it. The recording started. They didn't get to tell me to talk about my 3-year-old, so we'll record that later and pop it on there. But my name is Joey Pauley. I actually work for an organization. I work for University of Washington, Tacoma, but I also have my own organization called Applied Leadership Teams. One of our main pieces is that like learning not applied is lost. Okay, so that is a main tenet of our work. So when we're going through this lunch and learn today, I like to consider myself a facilitator. We're going to facilitate conversation. You're going to get into breakout groups. You're going to have some discussions. You're going to do those things. And what I want you to be thinking about is how you are going to apply this. Okay, and when I mean apply it, I'm not talking about like big honking like problems you're going to apply it to. What you really want to look forward to is like, what is a good 5% solution where I can apply this session? Okay, so when you're thinking about values and those areas, it's like, how might you be able to apply your values, or how might you be able to view your values or something like that? Just a 5% solution. One of the reasons, all right, I theorize that a lot of New Year's resolutions go really, really bad is because we try to make this big honking change. And then what happens is like we get dissuaded and it's like, oh, okay, you know what? Like, I'm not going to do that anymore. So think about like how you can apply it as you move forward. All right. A little bit about values. I was introduced to values in Mrs. McCann's 3rd grade class. All right. And Mrs. McCann talked to me about this idea of like self-actualization. Okay. And the self-actualization piece, what I remember from being a 3rd grader in her class was like, you have your values, and then you have your private self, you have your personal self, you have these public personas, and they're all like awesome and aligned, like over top of each other, like a bullseye. Okay. In 2007, I was working, my background was actually in web design before I got into organizational development. And in 2007, I felt like I was like getting closer and closer to this bullseye. I had a pretty lucrative job. I had lots of friends. I had a partner who cared about me a lot. There was a lot of those things that were aligned. And then 2007 happened. All right. And it felt like the big bang for me. I was working in real estate web design. And if anybody knows what happened to real estate in 2007, like it tanked. All right. And my company decided to downsize. I was offered a package. It's called the unemployment package. All right. And at the end of that, I was like, oh, you know what? Let me see really what do I want to do? Okay. And let me see if I can realign to these values. Let me see if I can realign to what I'm doing and being again, now that it felt like so spread out in that one big change in my life. All right, which was losing that position and looking at a career change. So I looked at my values. At the time, these were my values. I loved creativity. I loved connection. I loved community. I loved humor. Okay. I shuffled a deck of cards that had values on them and really looked at those pieces. And then I said, like, what do I really love about my work then? I like having strategic conversations. I was in web design and I love the creativity of it. However, the thing that I really loved was like working with the back end of people's websites and figuring out how their businesses worked, and then figuring out how to program like the back end and their leads and everything like that to be able to mimic how they work in real life. All right. I loved effective collaboration, and I love the idea of like applied leadership and how do we apply that. And over the last 10 years, what I've been doing is I've been working in this stratosphere under the guise of applied leadership teams. I've been working at several other organizations and such too. Where have I gone from this big bang? I would probably say it's a lot more aligned. It's in there. There were some big changes, but each day I looked at my values. I looked at how they aligned. And then I tried to find clients. I tried to find people to surround myself with that would also align with those values. And it felt better for myself. It felt better for my family. It felt like I was working and I was moving on a downstream current as I aligned more and more with my values, because I had more of an intrinsic motivation to be able to do my work. I would put a caveat on here. 3 years ago when I had that child, it probably blew up a little bit more, and then we came back a little bit. All right. So that's my own story around values. Some of the objectives today, by the end of this session, I want you to be able to identify and examine some of your core values. We're going to understand like how your values show up, and then like strategies to reaffirm and live out your values. Also, we're going to look at how they might apply to like organizational life too. But right now, we're going to be looking at your personal values, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay. So when I ask like, what are values? What are values? I want you to put a definition in the chat of like how you would define values. So if you can for me, like, what are your values? Or what are your values, but what are values? What would be the definition of values? All right, without going to Google. All right. Who's got it? Who's got a good one? Something to live by. It's the human operating system. I like that. Personal beliefs, the ideas that are important to me, guiding principles, calling out to others, things that are important, how you want to live, guiding principles, shared qualities, all right, that make life worth living. All really good areas. Yeah, nice. Okay. All right. How we would shared qualities that make life worth living. Other ideas, values are dynamic qualities. I like that idea of dynamics because, as I said before, like my values had changed. Okay. If we look and the definition that I saw was like values are deeply held views of what we find meaningful. All right. Or like, what are you expecting from yourself, even in the bad times? Now, somebody mentioned like the non-negotiable views. Okay, what are you expecting from yourself, even in the bad times? In organizational life, okay, you might see values like we did at the Overlake School. It's like compassion, curiosity, inclusivity, and equity, integrity, mutual respect. Okay. At my partner's work, she works at Redfin. They have their values on the walls. There's honorable, fire, rally, genuine. Everybody can be a leader. At University of Washington, sometimes they call these values like they'll dig in to start selling like competencies and those sorts of things. It's like we value individual excellence, interpersonal excellence, operational excellence. Okay. What I have to say about values is I like when people put them on the wall. I like when you write them down. Okay. Don't write them down like right off the bat. When you figure out your values, like write them down, and they're dynamic. They can be changed because as you start to live into them, you might see that it's like, oh, is this really something that I value, or do I want to change it and tweak it a little bit? Right? Because all of those things are artifacts. And what are values? It's in each and every one of us. Okay. What I find that in organizations is the sum and the average of certain values of the people inside of those organizations. Okay. Rise up to the values of the organizational culture. All right. And sometimes the structure does that too. All right. So we're going to look into a little bit more about your values. Okay. Megan sent you an email. Okay. With a document in there. And I'm also going to put 2 files in the chat. Okay, the one file just says values document. That's just a list of different values. All right, another document will look like this. Okay, and that's the file that Megan sent to you. Okay, the other file looks a lot more like this, and it's just a list of certain values. Okay, you can use either one of them, whatever you'd like. Okay. But what I want you to do, and we're going to do an activity, you're going to have about 5 minutes. All right. And what you're going to do is you are going to review the list of values and choose 7 values that are important to you in the list. Okay. If you cannot open either of them, I have put those values up on the screen. Okay. So I want you to review these values, and I want you to think about the 7 values that are most meaningful for you. Okay. When you have your 7 values, just write in the chat, done. All right. People are starting to get done. All right. A few people are starting to get done. I'm going to put a link into the chat. When you're done, I want you to add your values to that link too. Okay. So add your values to that link. A few more people are done. I'm going to give you about 2 more minutes. I know this is super quick, and I want you to think of it as a draft. All right. You'll see in that link, I then want you to narrow it down to 3 values that you find the most meaningful. Okay. 1 word per line. Yes, Julia. Thank you. If they are not on the list, that is fine. Please add your own. All right. Corey, you're going to add them to the link that I just put in the chat. So if you click on that link, you'll see that you need to then narrow it down to 3 that you find the most meaningful. All right, in about 1 more minute, I'm going to show you. All right. What others have been writing on there. About 30 more seconds. Carolyn, joy and helping others. I love that. All right. So you should have yourself narrowed down to about 3 values at this point. All right. And if you would like add them to the link that I put in the chat. For those of you who don't know, this is a Wordle. What happens with a Wordle is as people put their words in the chat, like if something is bigger, more people have mentioned it. So you could see that in this group, we have a lot of people that are saying creativity, empathy, integrity, honesty, meaningful work, independence, personal development. All right. And then kind of diving down from there. Jennifer mentioned that was hard. Okay. And it is hard. Okay. And it is hard, especially to narrow it down to 3. I try to say, hey, take it to 7 and then look at the 3 from there. Okay. What I want you to do, okay, now is I'm going to open up some breakout rooms. And I want you to talk about, okay, in your breakout partners, like, what are your values? Why was it hard, maybe for you, or why was it easy? Okay. You know, what like, what does this value mean? Like, what do you expect from yourself? Okay, even during the hard times. Okay, even during the hard times. So I'm going to put you into breakout rooms of about 3 or 4 participants. If like all of a sudden you go into a breakout room and there's no one there, just come back into the main session and I'll put you into a different one. Just wait a few minutes for people to be able to get into there. Okay. So you are going to be talking about like, what are your 3 values? What do you expect from yourself even during the hard times? And what was that process like for you? Okay. All right. And I'm opening up those rooms.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. What was that conversation like for you? And I just want you to put it in the chat. I butterflied into a few rooms. It was really, it was really nice to hear people sharing. I heard some people talking about like, hey, why are these values mine? What happened as a child that made like that lived into these values? And we look at that stuff in psychology. That's called family of origin work. Okay. I heard people talking about like, oh, you know what, like, how am I applying it in my work today? What do these look like? I had people talking about like, hey, none of those values seemed good to me. These are the values that I really, really hold. Okay. People felt better. It was great to hear others. I felt calm, silly. All right. Similar values. Some people had different values. And someone said it was challenging on the subject matter, but insightful in relation to how things play out in the workplace. Something that was brought up for me was the difference between the values we want to have and if those are actually the values we live by. And that'll be like a good transition into the next piece. I should have not read that, Chess, or Claire. So thank you. But yeah, like, are those the values that we live by? And once again, I just want to say, thank you for sharing in those groups. It can be challenging being able to jump in, share, talk about values, some of those deeply held beliefs that we find meaningful. It's not often that people like ask you the question and go, hey, what are your values? You know, they might see them, there might be artifacts of them, but most of the time people ask, hey, what do you do? Okay. And most of the time they're thinking about your job, those sorts of areas. Okay. If you want to, we're not going to do it today, but one of the things that sometimes helps people too and gets them a little bit more creative around their values is to define the value in their own words. This is page 3 of the handout that I sent over. Sketching an image of the value, if that helps you to be able to define that a little bit more. Sketching the opposite of the value. Okay. And why is this in value important to you? All areas to be able to kind of dig deeper into your values in those areas. I am a graphic design. Okay, my background was in graphic design. When I did that activity, this is the sketch that I drew. So that's the bar that I'm holding for you in those areas. Okay. But when we talk about this, it's like something that was brought up to them was like, hey, how do these play out? So I want you to think about on page 4 of the worksheet, okay? Or you could just draw a circle on a piece of paper, and that is totally fine, okay? And I want you to create what we're calling your life pie. So what you're going to do is you're going to create slices in this pie according to how much time you spend in maybe the following activities per week, like personal time, exercise, work, family, friends, romance, play. Feel free to add other categories: community service, parenting, spiritual activities, art, or if you want to break down your work a little bit more granular. Okay, that is totally fine too. Okay, and you say like, oh, you know what, like I do a lot of work coaching for kids. Or, you know what, I do more work designing programs. You can split those up in a way too. But I want you to take some time and be able to create your life pie and split this circle up, okay, into something that might look like this. I know you probably don't have colored markers or anything like that, but how much time do you feel like you spend in each area? Okay, so I'm going to give you about 4 minutes to be able to do that. So I want you to do that really quickly. Remember, consider this a draft. So write down your kind of life pie. And I'm going to put the timer on. You expected to hear the Jeopardy jingle. All right. All right, another 2 minutes. There you go. There you go, Julie. Julie. 1 more minute left. All right, 30 seconds. All right. All righty. So you should have some semblance of a life pie in that. What I want you to do now is I just want you to look back at the values that you circled in the first exercise. And now, how are they reflected in the way that you spend your time? Okay. And I want you to think about that. Just write down a little bit about that. I'm going to give you about a minute to like look at your values and look at like how are they reflected or maybe not reflected in your life pie. All righty. All right. You're only going to have a minute or two, so you're going to have probably about 2 minutes in the breakout room. I want you to discuss with your partner, how are those values reflected or not reflected in that life pie? What does it look like for you? All right. Discuss any alignment or misalignment. You're only going to have about 2 minutes. Okay. So be quick. All right. Really quick debrief with your breakout room. And those are opened up. All right. Welcome back. Waiting for a few more people to come on back in here. All right. Welcome back. And 6 more seconds. Get ready to jump into the chat for a second. And I want you All righty, excellent. Welcome back, everyone. All right, welcome back. I want you to jump into the chat on a scale of 1 to 10. All right, 1 being like I am totally aligned with my values, and 10 being like I am totally misaligned. Like, where would you put yourself on that scale? Okay, 1 being like most aligned ever, 10 being all right, totally misaligned. Where are you at? All right, it was the shortest breakout ever. All right, that's what we probably do here. All right, so good alignment. I see some 1s and 2s. I also see some 8s and 10s. All right, maybe a 3.5. Okay, 8.5. Some people are doing really good. They're up there. Okay. What I think about your values in those areas and how to develop them is when I think about my life pie, if I put them in 2 quadrants, I think about like, what is the core work that I love to do? Okay. The core work is what aligns with my values, right? The chore work, okay, is what is like maybe more misaligned with those values. Okay. And over time, my goal has been to be able to say, like, how can I expand my core work in that life pie and lessen that chore work? Because we're always going to have a little bit of chore in our work. Okay. I love doing these sessions and those sorts of areas. But I hate doing spreadsheets. Okay. And to be a facilitator, you got to do some spreadsheets every once in a while. Okay. When we look about creating satisfaction, okay, our values should be the foundation. Okay. They should be the basis of your long-term goals. All right. Those intermediate goals, okay, should be based on those long-term goals. And then we look at the daily tasks and that life pie. Okay. So a lot of the times what I look at in this pyramid is like, you know what? I want to be able to, whatever happens with my daily tasks, I want to make sure that they are definitely like aligned with those values. Okay. And making sure that I have a really good foundation of values. If anybody has ever done this activity is there's the same amount of rocks in each of those containers, all right, the same size. Okay. But on the container on the left, you can't fit all of those rocks. Okay. And on the container on the right, they're able to fit all those rocks. And the difference between these 2 containers is how they are filled. Okay. On the container on the left-hand side, people put the small rocks in first, and then they put the big rocks on top. And what I'm here to tell you today is that your goal is to put the big rocks in first. And putting the big rocks is your values. And all of the small stuff will be able to go around that and make their way around that. Okay. A few activities you can use after leaving this and applying your area is like writing down your value. Okay. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how well is this value being honored? Okay. And diving into like, what is an obstacle for it being honored? What is an action to be able to take to be able to increase those scores to be able to develop that over time? Okay. But we're going to go back to learning not applied is lost. Because what I want you to think of, okay, is one place, okay, 5% solution that will help you live into your values by the end of this week. All right, just a little bit more. How to like affecting your day-to-day. What is one little thing that you are going to do, all right, to get into those values? I can email the slide to you, Career Ray. I will send you my email address. All right. So what are you going to commit to? And I want to say not even the next 2 weeks. What is something that you'll commit to in the next week to live into your values just a little bit more? Okay. When you have that commitment, I want you to write it down. I'm going to put a link in the chat. Okay. And I want you to write down what that is. What are you committed to doing in the next week that would help you to live into those values? Let me see if that link is working. All right, try clicking on the link again, Jennifer. It should send you to the next page. Otherwise, there might be something at the top of the page that says. All right. You might need to refresh the page that you were on before. All right, giving yourself more grace and patience. All right, exercise. Starting a new craft, a better work-life balance. Nice. So you want to be able to look at like, what are those little 5% solutions that you can change and be able to notice. All right. As you develop these over time. As we look at like what a typical, all right, keep on putting those in there. We'll come back to them at the end. As we look at like what does typical implementation look like, is like oftentimes like when we're changing something, we're creating a solution, we get some like actionable information that might be this class around your values, right? And you try to change something and you like see resistance. Okay. Your confidence, your morale, your effectiveness might go down as like you try to live into those values a little bit more. At the bottom of the implementation curve, some people just ditch out and they say like, I'm not going to do that anymore. Okay. But if you re-engage in that process and like look for direction and kind of look to be able to say like, oh, how can I tweak this? How can I tweak what I'm doing just a little bit? You're able to integrate your values into your life much better and your work. Okay. A way to be able to track that information I have on a spreadsheet is like sometimes people change their values and those sorts of things. I use this in coaching a little bit more to be able to say like, oh, let me track my scores over time to be able to see like where I'm at and how I'm living into this value, because it often changes. I wanted to, Megan's going to put up a poll for you all in a second, okay, on this class. But I also wanted to say and leave you with a quote, okay? And some people say it's like, oh, I don't have enough time to do this. And this is a quote from David Allen, the author of Getting Things Done. And he said, in order to feel really good about what you didn't get done, you must have made some conscious decisions about your responsibilities, goals, and values. Okay. So thank you so much. If you want a copy of the slides, you can email me at jp@altconsulting, and I will send those to you. Okay. If you have any questions, all right, feel free to write those in the chat right now. But otherwise, you are good to go. All right. I will also share these Mentimeters out with you too. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Okay. And I appreciated you spending the time with us. What is the name of the book by David Allen? It's Getting Things Done. Getting Things Done. Excellent. Thank you, Demetrius. All right. Exercise. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Give folks another minute or so to finish up that poll.
Perfect. And if you would like a copy of the slides, there is my email address